welcome to Sweetpea Seeds Inspirations. My name is Sydney, and today we are going to work on the Sweethearts Cowl, or you can also make this into an infinity scarf if you would like. It just depends on how many repeats you would like to do. So some things that you are going to need to know how to do in today's tutorial is, of course, casting on. I will be using a long tail cast on. You are going to need to know how to knit, how to purl, slip one purlwise, and then also we're going to be slipping that slip stitch over top of a knit one, which I will show you how to do that in today's video. Now, this consists of a 26 row repeat. I know that sounds really crazy, but it's not that bad, because when we break it down, this section right here, that is our 26 row repeat, but we're going to do a garter stitch of 10 rows, and then this meshing here is going to be a 2 row repeat. So really it's not that bad. It's just when you combine all of the rows together, it is a 26 row repeat. So some materials that we are going to need for today's video, we'll go ahead and start off with our yarn choice. Now, this yarn I ended up getting in a giveaway a few years ago, but it came from Strength on Our Waves. She is from Australia. Now, she does have a Facebook and an Instagram, but I don't know if this colorway specifically is still available. It is the Ruby Sherbet. It is a superwash extra fine merino, nylon, and silk blend. There is 230 yards. I would say I've used about half, if not a little bit over half of that, I just made a cowl for today, but you can use the whole thing, 230 yards, to make your infinity scarf, or how many ever yards you need. Now, the needles that I use for today's video, and this is a DK weight yarn, so anything that is DK weight would be fine. Now, the needles that I did use for today's cowl is a US size 8 or a 5mm knitting needle. Now, you can use a little bit bigger knitting needle if you would like to make a little bit more drapier of a cowl or scarf. That is completely optional. And then you are going to need a tapestry or a darning needle to weave in your ends, along with some scissors. So I think that is really everything that I need to go over before we actually start. So we are going to start off with 10 rows of a garter stitch. And we're going to go ahead and cast on a total of 30 stitches. Once you have all 30 cast on stitches, we're going to now do 10 rows of the garter stitch, which is just 10 rows of knitting. So the very first stitch, which is going to be a edge stitch, we're going to actually start by knitting in the back loop only. So I'm going to go ahead and knit in that back loop. And once I have that made, I'm going to go ahead and knit in each stitch until I have made it to the very last stitch of this row. And if you would like to place a stitch marker at the beginning, so that you know this is going to be the right side, you can do that. I usually just use my tail where I have cast it on as a guide to let me know that is my front side. And once you have made it to that last stitch, we are going to knit in the back loop only. So that is row 1 of 10, and we're going to go ahead and continue repeating that until we have a total of 10 rows for our garter. So I will do one more row with you. So we are going to start off in that first stitch by knitting in that back loop only. And then we're going to knit in each stitch until we have made it to the last stitch. And once you have made it to that last stitch, you just want to make sure that you do knit in the back loop only. So we have done 2 rows out of 10 for our garter. So go ahead and continue repeating that until you have a total of 10 rows in the garter stitch. And then once we have gotten all of that completed, we will start working on the 2-row repeat for a total of 16 rows, which is going to be this meshing here in the center. We're going to start working on our 2-row repeat for our 16 rows of the meshing, which is right here. So we're going to go ahead and start off by knitting in the back loop only of that first stitch. And that is going to count as our edge stitch. So knit 1 in the back loop only. And now we're going to start by yarning over. We're going to slip 1 purlwise, knit the next stitch, and then that slip stitch, we're going to pass it over top of that knit 1. And that is going to be our repeat unit for row number 1. So go ahead and yarn over, and you want to make sure you're yarning over from front to back so your working strand of yarn is in the back. We're going to slip 1 purlwise, so we're going to go into that stitch as if we're going to purl. So slip 1 purlwise, and then knit the next stitch. We're going to take that slip stitch and we're going to pass it over top of that knit stitch that we just made. So again, that is our repeat unit. So go ahead and yarn over again from front to back, making sure that your working strand of yarn is on the back side of your knitting needle. Slip 1 purlwise, and then knit the next stitch. We're going to take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that knit 1. Again, that is the repeat unit for row number 1. I'll do that with you a few more times. Yarn over, slip 1 purlwise, knit 1, take that slip stitch and pass it over top or slip it over top of that knit 1, and repeat unit. Yarn over, slip 1 purlwise, knit 1. Pass that slip stitch over top of that knit 1, and then start the repeat unit over again. Yarn over, slip 1, knit 1, take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that knit 1. Go ahead and continue that repeat unit until you have made it to that very last stitch, where we are going to knit in the back loop only in that last stitch. Again, once you have made it to that very last stitch, we're going to knit in that back loop only. So that was the first row repeat. We're going to go ahead and turn our work. And now we will start on the second row repeat. So in that very first stitch, we are going to start by knitting in the back loop only. And then for our repeat unit, we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to make sure that our working strand of yarn is facing us. So it's going to be on the front side of our work. We're going to knit the next stitch, or not knit, but sorry, slip the next stitch purlwise. And then the next stitch, which is should be that yarn over from the previous row, we're going to go ahead and purl that stitch. And then we are going to take this slip stitch here, and we're going to pass it over top of that purl stitch. So pretty much we're doing the exact same thing that we did in row 1, but instead of knitting our stitches, we are purling. So that is the repeat unit. We're going to go ahead and yarn over. We're going to make sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. We're going to slip the next stitch, which should be that pass over knit stitch from the previous row. We're going to slip that stitch purlwise, and then we're going to purl the next stitch, which should be that yarn over from the previous row. Once you have made that purl stitch, we're going to take that slip stitch and we're going to pass it over top of that purl. Again, that is the repeat unit. So again, we're going to yarn over. We're going to make sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. We're going to slip purlwise the next stitch and then purl that yarn over. Take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that purl stitch. Again, that is the repeat unit. I'll do that with you a few more times. Yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip the next stitch, purlwise, and then purl the next stitch. Take that slip stitch and we are going to slip that over top of our purl. One more time, yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the next stitch, take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that purl stitch. So go ahead and continue repeating that until you have made it to the end of this row. And in that last stitch, we're going to go ahead and knit in that back loop only. And that is our 2-row repeat for those 16 rows, again, which is going to be this meshing here. I'm going to go through that 2-row repeat with you one more time. So starting off on our first row repeat, we're going to start off by knitting in that back loop only. And for our repeat unit, we're going to start off by yarning over, making sure that you're yarning over from front to back. Our working strand of yarn is going to be on the back of our knitting needle, and then we are going to slip the next stitch purlwise and then knit the next stitch. We're going to take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that knit stitch that we just made. And that is the repeat unit. So again, yarn over, slip the next stitch purlwise, knit the next stitch, take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that knit stitch. That is the repeat unit. Few more times, yarn over, slip purlwise, knit the next stitch. Take that slip stitch and pass it over top of our knit stitch. Yarn over, slip one purlwise, knit the next stitch. Take that slip stitch and pass it over top of our knit stitch. Go ahead and continue repeating that until you have made it in that last stitch where we are going to knit in the back loop only. So once you have made it to that last stitch, we're going to knit in that back loop only. So that is the first row repeat. We're going to go ahead and turn our work here and start off by knitting in the back loop only in that first stitch. Again, that is going to be our edge stitch here. And now for our repeat unit. We're going to go ahead and yarn over. We're going to make sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. We're going to slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the next stitch, and then we are going to take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that purl. And that is our repeat unit. So yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the next stitch, and then take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that purl. Again, our repeat unit, yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the next stitch, and then take that slip stitch and pass it over top of that purl. I'll do that with you a few more times. Yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip one purlwise, purl the next stitch, and then take that working strand of yarn and pass it over top of the purl. One more time, yarn over, making sure that our working strand of yarn is in the front of our work. Slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the next stitch, and then take that working strand of yarn and pass it over top of that purl. Go ahead and continue repeating that until you have made it to the end of, or made it to that very last stitch, and you want to make sure that you knit in the back loop only in that stitch. So then once you have gotten that completed, you'll continue working that 2-row repeat for, again, a total of 6 rows. After you have gotten that last row done, you should have already done 4 rows with me. So then you will just have 12 rows left to do. And then you're just going to go ahead and continue repeating that sequence of 10 rows of garter and then 16 rows of that mesh, which is the 2-row repeat, and then 10 rows of the garter, 16 rows of the mesh until you have reached your desired length. And I will try to make sure that those instructions are written down in the description box just in case if you need them. Now you do want to make sure when you are done with your cowl or your infinity scarf that you do leave off on the 16 rows of the mesh so that it kind of goes along in sequence. And then after that, we will start working on closing up our scarf or our cowl, whichever one you have made, and then we will be done. Now we're going to go ahead and just weave both of our ends together by just weaving it back and forth in each stitch. So I'm going to go through one stitch on one side, and then I'm going to go through another stitch on the other side and just pull through. That's all I am doing. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue that until I have sewn in each stitch. And I am doing this on the inside of my work, so my seam is not visible. And now all you have left to do is weave any loose ends and maybe block your cowl or scarf if you would like to, which I will be doing. But I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can feel free to email me, which will be down in the description box, or even ask away in the comments. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.